Hello and welcome to Let's Fix It in Pod, our little show where we discuss the thing that interests us about the VFX scene. So my name is Christoph, I'm a comp artist, I'm also a teacher and a journalist contributing to Digital Production magazine, and with me is my very dear friend Bela.
Hi, hello everybody, my name is Bela Beier. I'm the editor of Digital Production for many years by now, and yes, we have opinions and we're talking anyway, so why not record them? That's just easier, and it helps when who said what. So join us for our round of walking through different topics of VFX, CGI, the artist's life, whatever tickles our fancy. So Christoph, how did you get started with all of this?
Well, I actually got started in the crib because my parents actually started in claymation. I'm gonna jump over that part. And my very first piece of soft and hardware, I have to say, that I really got into compositing was a Quantel Henry. Now that's really
what year was that?
That was, I started in 98, so that must have been the first time I got onto a Henry was in 99, maybe 2000, something like that.
And the start of a new millennium.
Yeah, way back when. Oh, yeah. Well, that hugely expensive machine, I think it retailed for something close to a million something Deutschmarks back then. It was this huge box, and it came with something that we kind of lost today, which is control surfaces. So you got these faders which were motorized. They would move along to this to the intensity of the audio, which you never needed for commercials, but it made a great party trick at review sessions. Then you had this weird contraption called a rat, which was basically a joystick that you could hold in your hand with 4 buttons atop, which were the shortcuts that you use to collapse clips on the desktop and all that stuff. And then you had a jog shuttle, something I really used often to shuttle through footage. So you could remote the VCR with that, but you could also use it with actual clips you had working on. So it was really tightly integrated, actually so tightly that you never used the keyboard for anything except saving stuff to the library. That was the only use you had for the keyboard. Otherwise, this thing was driven with these control surfaces. Sounds weird, but had a huge advantage, and that was you really, as an artist, focused your view on the image you were working on, not on the value you were adjusting somewhere, like, am I multiplying by 1.1 or 1.12? That didn't concern you because you were looking at the image. Your left or right hand was handling the control surface, and that way you adjusted the value where it just felt right. It was a really, really tactile, really artistic way of doing a very digital work.
But, well, Henry's not around anymore.
No, it went the way of the dodo, that's for sure.
And yeah, these days we got software-only things. There's very few software, so you get extra hardware with them.
Yeah, and that was my experience when I switched then to stuff like the Cyborg or Flame or Nuke. I was stuck with a keyboard and a pen and a tablet. So pen and tablet is great, keeps you away from the chiropractica, at least my honest opinion. But I had to learn a lot of keyboard shortcuts, and I had to get adjusted to actually adjusting values on screen rather than with a control surface. And I always felt like this put up an additional barrier between me and the image. And so I was on the lookout for something to break down that barrier.
Could have asked me. There's loads of tools you can do that. But the pen and tablet way is great. There's this thing that I found quite annoying. A lot of artists do not look at their basic tools, the stuff you have in your hand all day long. I've seen people working on $1 million productions on a €10 keyboard, which is clunky and doesn't register half of the keys. So you can do better there. And if you're getting closer into the 3D world, into post-production, into working with images, there's a couple of things that are helpful. Well, one is obviously the basic mouse, and I'd highly recommend, if you feel the twinge in your hand, the first visits through the carpal tunnel, go into your local IT store, computer store, try a couple of mice. Most of the people I see use mice that are too small. So there's two grips. You can have them like this and move it like that, or you can have it probably lying on the back and have the mouse big enough that your fingers do not touch the table. They are $20, will do you fine. If you spend a little bit more, you could go for something like a professional mouse. In this case, I'm holding up the Cat Mouse Pro Wireless Left by 3D Connections, longer name than most people. And this is something called a professional mouse for a simple reason. It has a middle button, and everybody working 3D knows how often you need that. It obviously also has a wheel. You can go into both directions, so all four directions. Most wheels go in both directions, I've been told. and it is one of the first tools I want to show you that has one of the big problems, and I'm going to tell you later on what the problem is. You need an extra software for that. The software by 3D Connection works really well, and it's custom made for 3D applications. So you get special tricks and functions and pre-programmed settings and macros and stuff for things like Cinema, like Maya, like 3ds Max, like Revit, like Unreal, all of these things. And because they know that they're working for 3D artists and engineering and stuff like that, they make their tools play well with the tools the artists use. And also, it is big enough even for a grown-up hand.
It's so funny that we spend so much time each day in front of our computers. I mean, this is how we spend our livelihood. But in every company you walk into, you find workstations with the default keyboards that the workstation shipped with really mice where you can be lucky if you've got a wheel or a third button. So I've seen this in so many places, and it's like, we're living in the 21st century. We should have height adjustable desks, and we should have proper hardware on those desks. It's
Christoph, especially in studios. But if the company gives all their artists proper hardware, how will they sort out the older ones if they can't use their hand anymore? Back to the topic, input devices, because once you get used to it, there's always a little bit of a learning curve, but the things I'm going to show you, the learning curve is in minutes or hours, not in days. There are other tools where the learning curve is days to weeks to months, depending on how quick you're learning and how often you use them. And I always was thinking that hardware extensions should be used all the time. I don't need a button I press once a week to automate that. So if you were looking to the 3D world of Cinema, Max, Maya, Lightwave, whatever's out there, Blender obviously, then you go into the area of these things. This is also by 3D Connections. I'm holding up the Space Mouse Wireless. So it's a spacey mouse that is also wireless and quite heavy. You can keep your papers down or hit someone depending on the day and the mood. And what this thing does is basically a big button that goes nicely into your hand, and you can rotate this in all three directions, and you can pull it up and down and back and forth. So you have a 6 axis of movement, and this is something you can grab your model with it and rotate it or move it through your scenes. This is supremely comfortable way to work with, because you don't have to get the gizmo and drag it there or put in some numbers. No, you just go.
Well, it's really what this is at the gist of it all about. I mean, if you move a model in 3D space, you want a three-dimensional control surface. So as far as I understand it, you get exactly that.
Yeah, and these thingies are quite usable. They keep forever. I had this for 7 or 8 years ish, and it needs a proper cleaning, but besides that, it's working like the first day. Also
Solid.
works, and it is heavy, so if you go into the axis, it's not going to lift up. It takes some time, and something like that. If you're a 3D artist, give it a try. But Christoph, you mentioned chalk shuttles and that you're missing those. Why not simply add one to your current PC? There's something called the Shuttle Express by Contour. Contour does ergonomic things that are quite interesting, not always for everybody, but for a specialist audience, they are amazing. They have, for example, a mouse you move with your hands in front of the keyboard, and not accessibility comes also into that discussion, and they're doing well in this area. But the Shuttle Express, also quite indestructible, got a good decade on it. What it has is 5 buttons you can program in software, and then you have the chalk shuttle itself, which is a outer ring, which is spring loaded, so you can go back and forth. So you just hold it like this, and it goes forth and goes back. You can switch directions. A lot of the tools have the directions switched one way or another, just to do it not as the other one. So if you have a tool, you want to make sure that you can switch something easy like directions. The inner ring, you move it with your finger and it clicks, and is usually set up for going frame by frame by frame. This is a godsend for everybody who's doing video editing, because usually, so you have your J and your K for backward, and then you have a couple, you have the lift, you have a cut, you have a mark, whatever. The things you use the most of the time, it just sits under your hand and you move it, and you have your 5 actions you do all the time.
Well, this is actually what the control surfaces my Henry 20 years ago looked like. Not as well shaped, but the basic functionality was there.
Yeah, and this is not a complicated thing to build. This is not a complicated thing to move, but this is very, very good for video. And get one of these. There are different versions of it, but the basic principle of a chalk shuttle doesn't change, and hasn't changed for many years, and probably won't change for many years to come. It's not expensive. Also, these things are quite solid, and also, if you don't know that this is the thing for you, go for the second-hand market. Yeah, you don't have to invest that much money for something you're not sure about you're going to use, because this is one of the problems. A mouse works with everything. A keyboard works with everything. But once you get into more complex control surfaces, the software becomes a help and a hindrance, which some of us have learned.
I've got stories to tell, yeah. The thought of getting a proper control surface never really left me. However, one thing changed. When I was working on the Henry, and later on even I was working on a singular software. And now I find myself constantly switching between apps like Nuke, Flame, Mocha, Synthize, Silhouette, all those good stuff. But each of these softwares comes with different keyboard layouts. Of course, you can customize them to some degree, but I was looking for something where I could really have the same buttons in each and every software. So I wanted controls that were the same across the board. Also, I wanted this tactile experience. So what I got myself was the Loupedeck Mini, which is a really nice piece of hardware. They've got a more elaborate version, which is called just the Loupedeck CT, I think, which also has got a proper jog Shuttle, which also comes with an OLED and everything.
And they have there's also a smaller one, the Loupedeck S or something like that, which has just 3 of the turning buttons, the putties, and the screen and no actual buttons.
So this is the medium version, so to say. So it's got customizable buttons. Those light up. You can set up different pages, and you can do individual setups for a lot of software. It comes with a lot of presets, so the usual suspects like Premiere, Final Cut, Resolve are already set up. There wasn't a setup for Nuke, so
One thing I've tested the small one about this time last year, and there is currently a thriving community of people doing different layouts also for the common ones, and I think I've seen 12 or 15 different ones for Premiere, fitting onto the specific workflow you have. There was one obviously doing broadcast stuff, and things like that, or you can have the color ones or the bridging to After Effects like that. So it's quite easy to make your own set and store this set on the Loupedeck servers, basically.
Yeah. And that was my idea, and I started to fiddle around with that, and then I stumbled across the fact that Nuke doesn't ship with a shortcut editor, which is quite nasty. Especially if you want to change shortcuts, you can actually do that, but you need to code Python for that, and that's not in my realm of things. So I looked around Wikipedia, and I found a great little gizmo or extension by Ben Dixon, which is called Shortcut Editor. And it basically gives you what you would expect, a proper shortcut editor where you can define hotkeys, you can define combined hotkeys. You have to be careful with 3 or 4 because they are actually hardwired into Nuke and you can't change them, which is weird. But so I set myself up all the functions I want to trigger via the Loupedeck as custom hotkeys, got that done. Then I set up the Loupedeck, got that set. And it was really a great experience because I did stuff, for example, I adjusted the feather of a mask with a control dial, which is really nice and brings me back to the whole thing of looking at the image and not at the value. And I did a setup for transforms where I had X, Y, and Z on separate dials and could adjust them individually. And it was really nice to move stuff around and keeping looking at the image. So that worked all nice. And I did a setup for Mocha, basic one. And so I had the same zoom in, zoom out as I had in Nuke on the same dial, same buttons. It was great. And then I came to Flame and started to set up those buttons. And the first one worked. But when I got combined hotkeys, for example, Shift R to view the red channel, you want to assign that to a button on the Loupedeck, that didn't work. I have to give the companies credit. Their engineers stuck their minds together, but they couldn't make it work because something on the operating system level and the way how Flame interprets hotkeys doesn't jive with the Loupedeck. So the result of that story was that this now sits on my desk gathering dust because I use it for Nuke, but I don't use it for Flame. Then I keep using it, and I never really get to build up muscle memory with it.
One question. You're using Nuke and Flame on a Mac. Is it the same on if you'd use it on Linux?
That's a good question. We discussed that in the Flame forums because there are actually quite some compositing artists out there who want the same thing, like a universal control surface. I don't think that the Loupedeck itself is supported under Linux, but I might be wrong on that. I have to fact check that.
I like the Loupedeck, the little one. Spent many a boring meeting customizing a soundboard with all the things you need, because the kind of meetings I have to attend, I always need a Darth Vader voice. But it's just buttons and putties, so you can enter a command or you can go up and down a things. There's a third kind of thingy where you're gonna go 3D basically, which is balls. So yeah, and in this realm, that's one of the things. I don't have one here um, because they get expensive. This is not something you try for. Yeah, that won't hurt me, but that's something where you have to invest. I think the smallest ones are starting these days at about 200-ish. Those very small resolve
Yeah, and
ones.
that's basically the same amount I paid for the Loupedeck, and I think that's my lesson to take from this is if you get into this stuff, check if it works with your software, check if it fits your needs, if it is what you want it to do. Really give this some tryout time because the for example the jog shuttle you showed, if you find that you don't use it that much, it will not break your bank. But I think like if you spend a couple of £100 on hardware, you want to actually use it,
Yeah,
and you want to use it frequently.
yeah, and also this is in general, if you go for any additional control things, look at the software first. I've bought things that are in theory brilliant, but they don't work because it's made by a company in Asia and they don't have a translation layer. So you have an interface we can do, and that interface was updated last time in 2012. So if you're thinking about that, take a look at the software. If they don't have screenshots, big red flag. If the last update is older than a year, giant red flag. If they say, "Oh, you can figure it out for yourself," just run. And also, if it's something that sells in very very small numbers, I don't say run, but you have to have an extra deep look because there are some tool sets and some software packages. I'm not calling something like you can app. It's a software package. Something like that. You have professional hardware which can work but also can't work. In this realm, obviously, we're talking about grading panels. If you're surprised by that, it's going to be very interesting for you.
Well, grading panels don't have to be that expensive. I would like to showcase this. I got that for just one single job. So this is the tangent ripple. And I actually, I originally bought this for a job I did in Resolve. Now, people might wonder, why didn't you get yourself a Blackmagic panel? And that question is perfectly valid because, let's face it, the Blackmagic stuff is perfectly integrated into Resolve. It's the same company. But it's only integrated well into Resolve. And I listed all the software I used, and you might have noticed that Resolve is not like the app that I open every day.
Unlike
And
Nuke or Flame,
exactly.
Resolve is something that you use, let's say, one day out of 10, something like that. But you want to use your hardware 10 days out of 10.
Exactly. So that's why I got the Ripple. And it's got its drawbacks. So this is so bear with me here a second. So I bought this to grade in Resolve, even though I knew that it was not integrated as well as Resolve. What people have to understand is that Blackmagic is really fencing off the color page inside of Resolve for third-party plugins. So for example, if you get a more elaborate version of the tangent, let's say the Elements, which has got a huge array of customizable knobs and dials and jogs and all that, you can use that on the edit page, no problem. You can macro everything out of it. You can use it on the cut page, but once you get to the color page, Blackmagic is doing some funky hard wiring, and that it goes in both directions. So, for example, you will notice that you can't use a Blackmagic micro panel, for example, in any other software than Blackmagic software. You will not make it able to run inside of Flame or Nuke. And that then led me to the decision, okay, I'll get something which is not too expensive, which will be paid by that single job, but which I can use further on from there. And I actually did. If I do a lot of grading inside of Flame, I actually connect my tangent up and use that to do my lift gamma gains.
So to connect that for perspective with the old guys talking about things, these are very small panels, and there's not many of them. There's the Ripple one, then there's a small Avid thingy, I think, the CP whatever, and then these days there's the small Blackmagic panels. Those only came out in the last 5 years, to be honest. Before that, anybody asking for a small grading panel would be laughed out of the studio, because
Well, the small grading panel started at 5 figures. That was
small.
That was the truth.
Relatively
back then.
small. There were budgets. That was something really small, something you just got because why not? It's not that expensive. Yeah, budgets have changed.
Yeah. By now, the big Blackmagic panel, that's basically the most expensive dongle for Resolve you can buy, right?
Yeah, and it's it's a great panel if you work in Resolve, and it's sturdy. It's gonna last. It's gonna last longer than your artists these days. But it's just for that.
Well, that's something you have to give to Blackmagic, is that you can have the same functionality with a very small, very slimmed down panel, which is very affordable, up to the medium one. And then you've got the huge one. If you really still want to equip a proper grading bay, you can do that. But honestly, most of the colorists we talk to, they are perfectly happy equipping their own suite with the medium version. And this is the place where they spend every day doing their work. And they actually don't need the huge bay to run Resolve even better.
Not that long ago, color work was extremely expensive. Those guys were paid basically by the minute. And there weren't that many people who could actually do that. So the people doing the panels only sold big ones because there's a margin there. And not many productions, or not all productions, had a color workflow in any way. Some of them just went straight from camera to edit, print, and send it off. That's good enough. These days, every TikTok channel has some kind of color management in it. That's, for one thing, that's the camera's gotten more and more diverse in all different directions with integrated looks and stuff like that, which is something that didn't happen earlier. And with a couple of the panels getting cheaper, with the software getting cheaper and more affordable and easier to use, this changes.
Honestly, I think you can see that quite a lot. I mean, Blackmagic acquired Resolve out of DaVinci, which was one of these legacy companies you were talking about. And they've completely transformed not only the software, but also the hardware they are selling along to fit those needs. And honestly, for a professional YouTuber or semi-professional TikToker, a €500 panel is a great investment, will hugely amplify the quality of the videos they output.
And the speed of the necessary time to get a good look, a professional look, probably you won't do a IMAX grading on that. Yes, but for day-to-day use and depending on the channel, that's more than enough, and it's gonna elevate your content, whatever it is.
And one other thing to keep in mind if we talk about these smaller panels is also, with COVID, we established the remote office, the home office. I've seen a lot of people going into either a home setup or a co-working space where they work, and these things are mobile. You don't want to actually carry around a Blackboard 2 or the big Blackmagic panel. No, but in all seriousness, I think this is really a good example on not only software but also hardware democratizing. Like these control surfaces are now available to a much wider audience. And if you think about, I said the Henry where I started was 1.4 million Deutschmarks back then. And you couldn't buy these control surfaces separately or connect them to any other software for that matter.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think this development will get more pronounced once we get to the second and third hand market, because these days all of the Blackmagic panels, all of the tangent ones, those are still professionally built things. This is not a cheap squeaky plastic thingy. These things last if you take a bit of care of them and don't stick your bubble gum at the bottom.
Please don't.
They will last a long time. And so also, and this leads into that the previous generation of panels is these days still around and still very usable. And depending on which software you use, for example, if you're using things like Nucoda, like Simulate Scratch, like Phoenix, you can get a cheap panel that would have been a couple of $1,000 10 years ago, which is still going to work and still going to feel great in a refurbished and used way for a couple of $100.
Well, this sounds like a perfect segue to our guest, who's kind of proficient in the restoration and upscaling also of panels,
which is also a thing I find quite funny. The guy we're going to talk to is doing, for example, specialized rings for the grading panel. You have on the outer side you have a ring. Which is usually metal, and that's something that gets used all the time. So it has a residue, and not the nice way. So, and these days it's fashionable. If you're a big DIT on set, you have your own colorized rings. So to get into why this is relevant and how are these things still working, let's pass over to Mazze. So, hello, and to my side you see Mazze Aderhold, who is, on the one hand, doing stuff with Simulate and Scratch and LiveFX, and on the other side does the refurbishment of grading panels and doing the maintenance for tangent panels and stuff like that. So, whom better to talk to about old used hardware?
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. I've been doing grading panels for the past, 10 years actually, mainly, with my company Angry Face. I'm manufacturing upgrades for tangent panels. I'm also the official service center for the entire EU for tangent panels. And as Bela mentioned, I'm also doing refurbishments of used tangent panels.
Well, glad you could join us. Thanks so much for being part of the show. And that directly brings me to my first question. Bela and I just discussed the different consoles and hardware extensions we can get for our workstations. And I was figuring if somebody like me, who's not a colorist per se, but more like a generalist, VFX artist, doing a little bit of editing on the side, what kind of hardware would you recommend to somebody like me?
I guess it depends on the focus of your work. If you do want to do color, even only occasionally, I would recommend a small grading panel, because what the dedicated grading panels have over MIDI devices or Loupedeck and Contour Shuttle and all these is that they have 3 trackballs. And those you can usually operate with 2 hands at the same time, which makes it twice as fast. And learning how to use the color wheels and the trackballs on a grading panel, that's actually fairly quick. If you know what you're doing, where you want to go with your color, then operating those balls is fairly straightforward. And yes, that's also the bread and butter of any colorist. So once you have that panel put in front of you, you can start off with a very low budget panel and work your way up if you want. Yes, that is actually the biggest performance speed boost you can have in terms of color grading. If color grading is not really what you're after, then you can literally use anything that's out there from Logitech or Loupedeck, X-Keys, Stream Deck, or any MIDI device, as long as you can map keyboard shortcuts to it.
And how would you recommend for something more complicated than Microsoft Solitaire? What's the best software, or what is a flexible and easy to learn software for mapping set keys and pedals and chalk shuttles and stuff?
That's a good question. So I'm mainly proficient with tangent panels, and Tangent has their own driver called the Tangent Mapper, which allows you to not only hook into software implementations like Assimilate Scratch, like Resolve, which all ship native support for those panels, but it also allows you to map hotkeys and even map complete macros, as in I don't know, move mouse cursor to position X, Y on the screen, hold down the left button, increment the mouse wheel by 2 increments, and then let go of the left mouse button, things like that. Um, which makes the whole thing really, really versatile.
If you don't change screen resolutions.
Yes, changing screen resolutions will make this all go haywire. On macOS, you can use Keyboard Maestro, which works with most MIDI devices or any kind of input device, like a trackball, like any of these small devices, keypads that you can buy off of Amazon or Alibaba or whatever. And the other tools like Stream Deck, for instance, Loupedeck, and so on, they usually ship with their own software that allows you to configure at least shortcuts. I'm not sure if all of them also allow to configure macros and stuff like that.
For example, if I get one of the tangent panels, the small one, can I, for example, map my Shuttle Express within that software, or is it just for that panel?
The tangent software indeed only supports the tangent panels, yes. Okay. What you can use is a tool that's also Mac only, unfortunately, called Command Post, which not only supports the tangent panels, but a whole bunch of other panels and devices. And with that software, you can mix and match however you like.
So you gave us a good overview on what abilities there are to start with control surfaces, but what are we talking price range? So where do we start, and how expensive could it possibly get?
I think the most cost-efficient panel right now is a Tangent Ripple, which ships with the 3 tracker balls and master dials, and that starts at around €300, I believe. And from there on, you can upgrade to a Tangent Wave 2, for instance, or if you're looking at using a panel with DaVinci Resolve exclusively, you can obviously go with the Blackmagic panels. The new micro panel, version 2 of the micro panel, is at 500 something euros, I believe. And the mini panel, the bigger brother, starts at, I believe, 2,000 euros.
And if those things, how much are they used, or is there a used market for that?
Yes, there is. As a matter of fact, I sometimes buy defective panels, used panels, and I refurbish them. And once I'm done with them, they're actually better than new, and I sell them on, including warranty, I might add. Other than that, what you also find on the used market, and that might actually also be a good entry level, are the JL Cooper panels, and also the Avid McColor, or the old Euphonics McColor. It's one and the same panel. Avid at some point bought Euphonics and ripped off the Euphonics label and put on an Avid label. They're one and the same panel, and they are usually being sold fairly cheap, and they're still supported by all of the softwares that used to support them, like Assimilate Scratch, like DaVinci Resolve, and Filmlight also supported them, I believe. So if you have the chance of getting such a panel for cheap, and you know that it works, go for it. They're really good panels, and they don't break easily, so you don't have to be afraid that you buy it and it falls apart after 2 weeks of use. If they work, usually they continue to work.
And if we look at the provider, so one of the things I always wanted a panel, but I'm jumping around between different softwares. What is the panel that works with the most stuff? I think that would be the tangent ones, but is there a way to map panels between softwares? For example, if I have a tangent panel in Resolve or a Resolve panel in Filmlight. Well, the Filmlight guys would hunt me down, yes, if I do that, but is something like that even possible? And is it functionality, or is that let's call it closed garden?
Frankly, the Filmlight guys did a really, really great job of mapping third-party panels like the Abbott panel and the tangent wave and element panels. So I'm not sure they would hunt you down. Maybe appreciate you for making use of their code. Anyways, so the Blackmagic panels are generally really good panels, technically. But obviously they only work with DaVinci Resolve. So if you're using literally any other software package, you won't be able to use those panels because Blackmagic has never released an SDK for third-party developers to implement and add support for these panels. I've gotten that question quite a couple times at Assimilate, where people wanted to use their Blackmagic panel with Scratch, for instance, or Live Effects, but yeah, unfortunately our hands are tied here. For the tangent panels, they are indeed the most widely supported, and I would probably recommend, depending on your needs, to go for either a Wave 2 panel, which is a really, really great all-in-one panel with a reasonable desktop footprint. Especially if you're using it only occasionally, you can just grab it, throw it into the cupboard, whatever, stow it away when you don't need it, and just patch it back, plug it in, and it just works. And it also works with any software that supports the old Wave 1 panel that Tangent released, 15 years ago, I believe.
15 or 50?
It is that old, but it still works. That's actually something that I should probably point out. The Tangent panels are rock solid. They are really rock solid. Like I said, I'm doing the support and repairs for Tangent panels for the entire EU, and I have about 10 panels per year on my desk, and most of them are ripped off USB connectors because somebody tripped over the cable, something like this. And this, in 90% of all cases, can actually be fixed by soldering on a new USB port, and the panel is gone again. Only rarely it has been ripped off in such a way that it damaged the entire circuit board, and then that gets replaced. But all in all, the Tangent panels are really serviceable and rock solid. They almost do not break.
So you mentioned the Wave, which is kind of the medium panel from the Tangent lineup. Let's take that as an example. So and in the scenario of somebody, which is more and more the case now, of somebody working multiple disciplines like editing, like grading, like a little bit of VFX and all that, what are the elements that might be missing from such a setup? Could I complement that with another tool, with another extension, for example?
So yes, you can of course do that. The good thing about the Wave 2 is that it's a fairly complete panel. It has buttons, it has encoders, it has a jog shuttle wheel, and it has the tracker balls for color grading, which obviously you can also use for framing and things like that. Sure. If you want to add something like a Stream Deck, just as an example, you can of course do that and map hotkeys or things that should work cross applications. Things like quickly opening text edit so you can take some notes, stuff like that. Nothing prevents you from doing that. But yeah, the Wave 2 is actually a fairly complete panel with encoders, knobs, buttons, jog wheels, tracker balls, and displays, I might add.
Just an idea. Imagine a world where Tangent doesn't exist. What would I need on my desk to replace all that? A load of X keys, boxes, probably. But
Yes, and a family package of headache pills, stuff like that.
oh, I always have those under the table,
No, I mean,
right next to the heartburn medication and the earplugs.
obviously, there's always the high end panels. Filmlight have their own control surfaces. The Slate, the Blackboard Classic, Blackboard 2. Blackmagic has their range of panels, ending with the advanced panel at around 26K, something like this. And same for Digital Vision, SGO, Mystica. All these software packages have their own dedicated high-end panel. But that is obviously total overkill for the occasional colorist. Also, being an occasional colorist, you would probably not buy into any of these packages. So if there was no tangent in this world, you would probably have to really plug your stuff together using 3 separate trackball devices. And obviously, the thing is, if you do mouse cursor macros, you could program that. Move mouse cursor over the, lift tracker ball on the UI, hold down left mouse button, and now, move mouse cursor into this and that direction. You can do that. The downside is that you could only do one wheel at a time. You could not use both hands at the same time. And this will slow you down immensely. It will still be somewhat of an advantage, but I'm not sure it would justify the effort of buying all the components and writing all those macros and doing all that. So beyond hotkeys and simple encoders, like I said, the tracker balls are the bread and butter of any colorist. So that would be difficult. If that is not your aim, then there are plenty of options outside of a dedicated grading panel.
One more question. One thing that at least in my line of business comes up more and more is not only remote work, but remotely working on a different machine. May that be an AWS cloud or just a remote computer at a different facility. Are there any pitfalls we should be aware of when it comes to using a control surface with a remote workstation?
Yes, you need to make sure that you have proper USB tunneling, either as part of the remote software, whether it's Parsec or whatever you use, or a dedicated USB tunneling software for that, or it is part of the color grading application that you use, where basically you lock two locations together running the same software, like Scratch here in Munich and Scratch up there in Hamburg. You establish a remote session there, and whatever you apply to the project here using your control surface gets applied on the other side as well, where basically you're not forwarding the control surface commands, but the softwares talk to each other.
So you mentioned that you not only repair and sell panels, but you also you upgrade them with individual rings or special coating. Could you tell a little bit what a user who decides to upgrade his tangent elements with your good stuff, what he can expect?
Yeah, totally.
And why would anybody do that, since they are so beautiful?
The tangent panels are beautiful. However, so the most versatile panels from Tangent are definitely the element panels. And if you plan on, elaborating on your color grading skills and going more that direction, I would actually recommend starting with the either with a complete set of elements and then you're good to go, or you can start with, just the center panel with the 3 tracker balls and the rings, and then, upgrade your build until you have all 4 modules of the element range. Now, the downside of these panels is twofold. One downside is that they used to come soft-coated. And this soft coating is actually, you can find this in the automotive industry. In the early 2000s, everything had to be soft coated because it gives you this smooth, rubberish feel to any kind of handle. If you buy cheap hair dryers and stuff like that today, they still come with that soft coating. And after 1 year of daily use, especially with those grading panels, which receive plenty of sweat, blood, and tears by their operators, that soft coating just gets,
Depending on the software.
depending on the software, yes, sure, maybe more so depending on the client who's breathing down your neck, but
Yeah. Art director.
bespoke soft coating becomes sticky and disgusting. I've had panels here, that had hair and nails and God knows what, embedded in the surface. It's really one of these things where I realize I don't charge enough for this job, because cleaning toilets on a subway station or at the airport might be more fun. Anyhow, by now, Tangent actually powder coats the element panels, so the soft coating is a problem of the past. However, they've been only doing that for, I don't know, 2 years now, I believe, 2 or maybe 3 years. So everybody who's bought his set of elements before that has still a powder-coated version. And especially in very humid countries, Latin America or, Turkey, Africa, it happens much faster than it does in our hemisphere, but it also happens, of course. And then you can send me your panels. I'll take them completely apart. Everything gets cleaned. And the fascias of the panel are being swapped against powder-coated ones. You'll also get new display windows. And this will make your panel not only look nicer, also feel nicer, and it's also a very sustainable way of refurbishing these panels, because I will take the old sticky fascias and I will have them stripped and re-powder coated, and I will use them for the next job. The other things that are not great about the element panels are the rings. They're made of plastic and they're also soft coated. So at some point, I asked Tangent for replacement rings, and they basically made it an item. And for a while, I was the only place on the planet where you could get replacement rings for your element panels. So I had orders from around the globe. Really, Australia, China, the US, obviously, Vietnam, everywhere. And I sat there hours on end filling out customs forms, whilst maybe making $10 on a set of rings, knowing that in a year from now, all these people would come back and would want the next set of replacement rings. So I sat down and designed a set of rings that I had machined out of aluminum here in Munich. And in the beginning, they were sandblasted and anodized. By now, they are being powder coated with a fine structure finish. And with these rings, they're obviously a tad more expensive than cheap plastic rings, but I really, really hope whoever buys a set of rings buys the last set of rings he'll ever need. And I only have to bother once with shipping them around the globe, and not on an annual basis. So I did that, and these are the main two flaws of the element panel: the rings and the coating. Like I said, coating is not a problem anymore with any new set that you buy. The rings still are, and they make for a nice upgrade once you feel like, giving yourself a treat.
And if you powder coat them yourself, could I, for example, do any color I want? Can I have a panel for the intern that is hot pink?
Frankly, yes, we do custom projects. With powder coating, it's a bit difficult because the powder coating metallic things with a fine structured finish, so you have some grip on the ring, actually doesn't look that great. I would not recommend doing that. What we usually do, if somebody from, the Emirates, for instance, wants golden rings, we actually had that request. It didn't come through, but we had other people requesting golden rings for whom it was enough for them to look golden and not actually be gold-plated, which we could have done. No, usually what we do is we then have them anodized. with the hint that the grip won't be as good as with the fine structured powder coat. Still good enough for most people, but not for everyone. Other than that, yes, we've had fancy requests like gold-plated rings or rings coated with Vanta black. Not sure if you heard of that.
And the 99% black
Yes.
coloring, which is basically just visually a hole in the world.
Yes, it's the blackest black that you can buy, and also horribly expensive. I think even more expensive than gold-plated rings at this point. So yeah, we can look into those things for you. Other than that, what we did was we revived the foam inserts for the element panels to put into a peely case. These were not being manufactured anymore. We redesigned them and are manufacturing them again. And also dust covers for the element panels. And more of a cosmetical upgrade than a functional upgrade, we also have our dark petrol metallic tracker balls for the element, wave, ripple, any tangent panel, as a matter of fact.
So, one last question.
Shoot.
I know that you've got a little side project, that you got yourself a original DeLorean and you're renovating that. So I was just curious, what's more disgusting? Upgrading a really hard used grading panel or a 30-year-old car?
That is a wonderful question, and I can't tell you. I mean, with my car, it has served as a 5-star Rodent hotel for like 30 years. And at the beginning, it smelled accordingly. So I ripped out all the carpets and the seats and everything and had that cleaned, which was a horrendous job, which I will never in my life do ever again. A choice I don't have with tangent panels, unfortunately. But they're equally disgusting, you know. If you find yourself in the middle of a job wishing to be cleaning toilets on the subway station, instead of doing that, I think that says a lot. But, you know, choosing which one is more painful, I'm not sure. I wouldn't wish any of the two on anybody.
Well, perfect thing to end this wonderful talk. Thank you so much for being part of the show. And yeah, have fun with all the other stuff except cleaning out panels or old cars for that matter.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
So you've been to Amsterdam. I figure you want to tell me everything about all the greatest Bitterballen and maybe all the cheeses you brought home. But honestly, I want to hear about IBC.
Well, with this year's IBC, it would be happier if I told you about Bitterballen, because it was a little bit more muted, though. The industry is not in a very good mood right now, because with the aftermath of the writer's strike and the managers using the word AI to replace everything they think is useless, which usually only means management is useless and spends their money on new toys instead of getting work done. I have opinions on that, many opinions. So nobody's buying stuff for new shows because everybody's waiting when the new shows are coming over. And yeah, there's a bit of a holding pattern.
Did you bring me this 17K camera I asked for?
No, I asked them if they want to give it to you, and they said no, they're only gonna give those to full-time Resolve users.
Now tell us about that one.
Yeah, so 2 days before the IBC, Blackmagics sent out a newsletter, which they're doing if they have a new product, introducing the physics monitor, or Pixies. I can't. It's one of those artificial names, which is a really nice monitor you can put on your camera and think, I wrote the news for that. No, that looks nice. That looks fun. And wrote the news, did something else. Looked back into the mailbox. Also we are announcing a 17K camera.
I get that right, 17K.
Yeah, and I first thought, come on, it's going to be a 12K and there's going to be a typo there. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody. So, and did something else, and I read again. So no, they have the mistake of, do they really mean 17? Yeah, they do.
Yeah, what would you need that for? I mean,
Well,
I know this question gets asked with each and every format.
but 17 is a big jump from the 4Ks that are standards. I mean, theoretically, this is a 4K camera. You have a 4K camera there. So
Sure.
and the thing is, with higher resolutions, there's these magazines that say, who needs that? Who needs that? Usually those magazines do not include people working in post, because for a great many jobs, a higher resolution, a area outside the frame, which you can use for things, is quite good. Tracking, stabilizing, these things, brilliant. Or, for example, if you have really difficult shots with difficult lighting, you can block a part of the sensor for, there's going to be a silver ball, there's going to be a color chart, there's going to be some kind of pattern or something for focus pulling, things like that. That's quite usable and quite helpful if you have a DOP who knows what he's doing and also doesn't just think his job stops when he presses the stop button. So that's one side. 17K is we're going towards IMAX, which is officially the best resolution, and that's in that area. So you can do digital IMAX, theoretically. But currently there is pre-production models and test samples who are not the finished product yet. Yeah. And the second thing is with these kinds of cameras, and also this is valid for the 12K cameras and the 6K cameras as well. The 6K cameras are for downsampling. So if you have difficult lighting and you're going to broadcast in 4K, you shoot in 6K, and you have a resolution reserve for the downsampling. So you get all the information in a smaller or in a different amount there. So you have, for 1 pixel, you have 4 to take this photon. So this makes the algorithms for downsampling much more efficient and much more reliable. When you get to the things that post-production usually forgets, a ginormous resolution is extremely helpful. Think sports, think crowd work, because then imagine you're at soccer, for whatever reason, lost a bet or something. You can have 4 cameras doing one this area, one this area, one this area, or you can have one giant 17K camera going with a wide angle, all of it, and just grabbing the part of the image where the action is.
Two things come to mind. Firstly, I think 17K is gonna break a lot of people's minds when you come to downsizing, because you usually try to do that by like 25, 50%, etc. Mm-hmm. So this is gonna be nice monkey wrench thrown into our work. And the second thing I'm really eager to see is, of course, how the lenses hold up to that kind of resolution, because that's a big idea. And I knew when the Red came out way back when, and 4K was still like this huge super format you just described. People started to shoot like that, wide angle lens, and we'll zoom in post, no worries. And then nobody saw all the slightly out of focus stuff that actually happened. So I'm really keen to see lenses hold up. That's going to be a big breaking point.
That's going to be a problem at first, but I think depending on your setup, basically nobody cares if soccer is a bit out of focus, for example. So that's the difference in quality expectations for different outputs and formats and stuff. And I think that a lot of content these days does not get produced for proper TVs or cinemas or something. The ones that are shooting for smartphones, for small tablets and PC screens and stuff like that, they are not interested in quality. They're interested in efficiency and removing as many people off the pipeline as possible. And one of the things I think for post work, when you get a couple of good DOPs, they are out there. There's few of them, but they are there. They're gonna have a wide range of things to make post work easier. Because imagine the DOP wants a special kind of lens with a special distortion, and he knows this one has a problem in the lower right corner. Yeah, so I'll move the pixels here. I go shoot 17K through the whole area, and I'm going to make sure that nothing is down there. These are options that are there. Then light merging.
Yeah, I got opinions on that one as well. It'll make match moving a nightmare, but let's see where this leads. So what we can take away from this, 17K is now a thing. And
it
we
will
somehow
be a thing by the end of the year. You can pre-order it. The delivery is yet to come.
Yeah, and we somehow all missed 16K, which was what I expected after 8K. But there you go.
They done one better. And let's be honest with the people building cameras, doing one better just for the shits and giggles is also an option. We know these people, there's a sense of humor there.
So, anything else interesting you saw in the show?
There's actually two things. One we heard before was ZBrush on the iPad, which I actually liked. Okay, and cool. The other thing was the electric sheep. And no, I'm not an Android dreaming about that. So let's start with that. It's something a friend of mine pointed me towards, and I met with one of the two founders of the company. Electric Sheep is a machine learning based rotoscoping solution. So there's going to be a website. You put up your footage. Machine learning algorithms do their magic, and you get a more or less perfectly done rotoscoping within minutes.
Okay.
So I think the current, there's still pre-production. The current is two times of real time. It's the time they need for.
So this is not an application I download and can run locally. It has to be done on their servers, right?
Yes, it has to be done on their servers. I think they're AWS based.
Okay.
But one of those, and it's basically not sending the rotoscoping work to Bangladesh or to India, but to a server farm somewhere. They have a quite competitive pricing model, which is not finished yet, so I'm not going to tell you. Mm-hmm. But that's something I see as a first proper tool for post artists. So that's something, because everybody can do rotoscoping.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were kind of first excited and then a little bit disappointed, like around the time when things like the Roto bot came out. That was great for layout work, maybe for grading work. You could use some rough mats generated out of that. But that was firstly semantic. So only if the specified keyword was actually in the list of trained models, you could use it. So that was a big constraint. And the other thing was the quality was, well, for layout work, it was okay-ish in some cases. So you were quite impressed by the quality, I hear.
I was shown by one of the founders of the company a demo. So let's take it with a grain of salt. We're going to test it, obviously, for ourselves. With we're going to get the fluffiest cat on the noisiest background and see what's going to happen then. But they showed me videos. Was two people dancing, and one had a struggly beard, and one had really long straight hair, which is for rotoscoping, that's a nightmare. And it worked, as far as I've seen, really well, really quickly, and very clean. There is some things you can do with it that are impressive, but it's very focused on doing roto, just that, and doing that well. He showed me another one where there's a dancer with some loud clothes with shapes and stuff like that in dozens of colors, jumping around in front of a well-lit forest, which is basically all shapes, everything shapes, everything moves around. And that looked really good in a very, very short amount of time. So I think that's something very interesting because nobody likes Roto, for one. And secondly, this is one of the first applications I see where I think that machine learning has actually been done in a way that helps artists and not just adds to the workload of going through iteration after iteration after iteration.
Yeah, talking about iterations, that's a little bit of still of my concern with this is, as with all the AI tools out there, you've got very little control over what you actually can define as parameters, and you get what you get. So iterating on that work, and I've for example used mats generated by Copycat, which were kind of like 80-90% there, and I have to be honest, they saved me a lot of work, but still I had to manually go in and paint stuff that was like not properly rotoed. I had to paint that in or out, and that's something where I'm still a little bit on the fence about just getting out this finished mask with no way of iterating on that work, especially when it gets to fine hair detail.
What I had my hands for the first time was ZBrush on the iPad, and that really works. That's something to bring us back to control surfaces.
True.
So the base of this app is a full-fat ZBrush. It's not a light version. It's not a beginner version or something. That's all of the tools, the brushes and stuff. A couple of things aren't working yet, but Maxon tells me this is a thing of very, very soon. They have a couple of the more difficult advanced polygon things aren't quite working yet, but it won't be long. The thing I liked about it is that it feels great. I'm not a ZBrush user. I know half my way around it, so I can do a ball and I can have a nose on the ball. And the interface is special. But this kind of interface in a iPad multi-touch environment with a pen makes perfect sense because it interacts really well with how you expect it to interact. And the mobile interface actually helps and gets you very quickly to the tools you want, to the tools you need, and all the layout makes sense, so you can get up and running quite quickly. And since it's a full version, you have all the tools you expect, and it's a very natural way to digitally play around with clay.
That's interesting because I think a couple of months ago we got Resolve for the iPad, we've got Logic Pro for the iPad, we've got Final Cut for the iPad, so Lightroom. There are professional applications on the iPad, and I mean it's quite natural because basically they're using the same chip as in the Silicon, the Apple Silicon Macs. So translating those apps isn't the most difficult thing, but what you tell me is that ZBrush actually takes a look at, okay, this is a different input device and we're going to utilize that to the most. And frankly, this is when I took my first look at Resolve for iPad, I thought, yeah, okay, this is a smaller screen. I've got the same chip on the inside, but honestly, if I've got the choice between a MacBook Air, for example, which has got the same chip inside, but it's got a proper keyboard where I can use a tactile input, I would much rather prefer that to use shortcuts and all that. On the other hand, with ZBrush, it totally makes sense to bring a version of that to the iPad because it utilizes this multi-touch thing. I think from what I've seen and heard, even better than, for example, a Cintiq or any other input device.
If it's up to a Cintiq, especially the large size and the better pen. Let's be honest, the iPad pen is good, but it's not great. But as a standalone device, it really makes sense. I think all the other examples you mentioned, Resolve Mobile, Fine Cut or whatever, those are in an emergency options. This is you're gonna use Resolve Mobile if you have to have a professional player on set, or you have to do some review stuff or something, or if you want to demonstrate something. Nobody's gonna say, "Ha! Today I have a nice day. I'm gonna work on my Resolve license on an iPad." Haha! And people who do that are well, probably there's always one who does that, but the rest of us don't. And I think we have the option of porting it, so maybe it helps someone. And this is the first one who feels that it actually works better.
It was designed for the iPad.
Designed that feels like it has the limitations of the device aren't limitations that affect you in working in ZBrush. So yeah, that was quite nice, and also not a ZBrush guy, but I found my way around very, very quickly. Yeah, I like that.
So this concludes our very first episode of Let's Fix It in Pod, and we really do hope you enjoyed that. If you did, share it with your friends. If you didn't, share it with your enemies. And if you can find it in your heart, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be here on the same day next month with another episode, and we really hope you join us for that. Until then, bye-bye.